Hi, I'm Rose, and I do essential oils, and probably one of the most requested recipes of all the things that I make is my deodorant recipe. So I was going to make it here with you and teach you step by step how to do it. It's probably one of the most important things to make your own rather than, or just use a natural rather than to use a lot of the stuff that's out there, because there's tons of bad stuff in it and you have it under your armpit, so it's soaking right into those lymph nodes, which we know things that we put on our skin soak in through our bodies. So the aluminum and stuff, there's definitely a lot of studies that show that that is cancer causing. So that's why I make my own, and actually it works a lot better than anything that I've ever bought. So here's how we do it. I'll give you the recipe written at the end of the video, but I'm going to go step by step through. And this recipe makes about 4 to 5 tubes of deodorant. If you use the typical deodorant tubes like this, which I just buy these empty ones on Amazon, and they seem to work really good. Even though with this recipe you don't actually use it like this, you have to actually use your finger. It's a little bit too soft to rub on that way, so if you use your finger and just rub like a pea-size amount into each armpit, it tends to work the best. But you can get these in bulk on Amazon, and then I do reuse them too. So, alright, so the first thing that we did, and I have that all prepared for you since it takes a little bit of time, is I grated up beeswax like this, and what we want is 1.5 heaping teaspoons of melted beeswax. So you want to do quite a bit more, because when you grate it, it definitely takes up more room than when it's melted. So I like to melt that first and then measure. You can get beeswax at health food stores. My dad has bees, so luckily I get it from him. So what I did was, I can bring you over here, in a double boiler. So I just put a Pyrex container inside of a pot and turned it on and melted all that grated beeswax. So I actually have that melted. There's different colors too. This one happens to be a much darker beeswax than some. I prefer the lighter just because it does look nicer, but it really doesn't matter. So I have, it takes a while to melt, but it definitely cools down quickly, so you want to kind of work it quick. Now I have a bigger pot over here that I prepared that's big enough to mix everything in. So I'm just going to move that over. Again, same thing. I just used a glass Pyrex dish in here and put a couple inches of water, just enough to probably go up that much on the pan. So we're going to do, this is the recipe here, which I'll show again at the end of the video. 1.5 heaping tablespoons. So we're going to pour just until it spills over the edge and then dump it in. It's hot, so you have to be careful. So that is 1. This is a half right here. And I just dribble a little bit extra in just because, as you can see, it kind of coats the inside there, so you end up losing some. So I do just a little extra drizzle. Alright, hold on, I gotta let Ava out. So that's in your bigger double boiler there. Now it's melted and it is measured out. So we're going to add 5 tablespoons of raw coconut oil. Now this isn't the coconut oil like you're probably used to that's like a jelly texture. This is actually raw, and it's hard. You're going to have to kind of pry it out of the jar. This is what I like to use, this Artisana Organics raw coconut butter. It's one of the few that I've found that's in its hard state. So you're actually going to have to kind of scrape, scrape, scrape to get it out. Unless it's a warmer day, then it is a little bit easier. So I already have 5 tablespoons of that measured out right here. So we're going to add that to the double boiler. Okay, I'm going to turn this heat up just a little bit here. And this melts pretty quickly, so I'm just going to stir. I'll show you here. It's starting to melt there, and the more you stir it, the faster it'll melt. You don't want to get the heat up too high, because if it starts to bubble and splashes over it, you're working with all these oils, and oils and water don't mix. So it kind of complicates things when you have a drop of water floating around in there. So it's best to try to keep it just under boiling. So that is melting there. I usually make a batch about this big, and it lasts me probably about a year. Sometimes I'll make a double batch if I'm giving them away or, you know, selling them or anything. Okay, so that's pretty smooth. So the next thing on the list is our soft coconut oil. Now this is my recipe, but I do it a little bit different each time. Going back to the raw coconut oil, you can cut that with cocoa butter or shea butter. Just make sure you get the raw, hard cocoa butter and shea butter. You don't want to use like a lotion, a cocoa butter lotion. Pure 100% cocoa butter. I didn't have any of that, so we used all coconut oil. So we have our raw coconut oil melted into our beeswax now. Now I'm going to add the soft coconut oil. This is, you know, the unrefined stuff that you can find just about anywhere. Very popular. Lots of good uses. Okay, and this melts really quickly, so we'll just stir that in there real good. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now this part I do different every time. We're going to add 1.5 tablespoons of any oil of choice. You can use argan oil, grapeseed, olive oil, whatever you like. I tend to go for ones that really kind of help with the skin, like jojoba oil or almond oil. Today we're going to use almond oil. And I have a little bit of vitamin E oil too, which you can get vitamin E in the pharmacy, usually with the dietary supplements. Vitamin E is very good for your skin. So I'm just going to, we need, what did I say, 1.5 tablespoons. So this is a 1/2 tablespoon measure here, so we'll need 3 of these. So what I'm going to do is one vitamin E oil, and then the other 2, the full tablespoon of almond oil. This is one of my favorite carrier oils here to use with essential oils. One and 2. Okay, so I'm just going to stir that up extra good here. Make sure, sometimes when that cooler oil hits the melted oil, it hardens it up for a second, and then it just has to melt again. Now I'm going to add a little bit of Bragg's apple cider vinegar. This is organic vinegar, and you have to shake it up because it has the sediment on the bottom there. This is going to be 1 tablespoon, and the reason for this is it's antiseptic. It's a deodorizer, so it helps with the odor also. But one of the big things that with natural deodorant that people usually will get irritated by is the amount of baking soda in it, which really kind of alters, it messes with your pH. So baking soda and apple cider vinegar are opposite on the pH scale. So if you add some vinegar, it kind of balances it out and helps it pH to our neutral or our natural pH of our body. So we're just going to put 1 tablespoon of this in. If you tend to be extra sensitive, you can do a little bit more. That's a half, that's a whole. Okay, so once we get that in, I'm going to actually stir it again to make sure it melts. And then we're going to remove it from the heat. So let's turn the burner off. I just use a towel to reach in and grab it because it is very hot. So we'll slide this out of the way and bring this back over to where we're working. Let me tilt the camera a little so you can see that a little better. Okay, so now before it starts to harden, we're going to add our drops of essential oils. Now this, I have picked 5 this time. I switch it up a little bit sometimes, but each has a reason. So purification is number 1, which this is the deodorizer oil. So this one is known for, if you can see that, is known for getting rid of odors, whether you're diffusing it in the air after you cook to get rid of odors, or putting it in a spray to spray your shoes or your dog's bed or anything. I'm actually going to put 10 drops of this because this is a powerhouse oil for this recipe. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. The next one I chose was lavender. Lavender is good for your skin, helps with irritation. This bottle is almost empty. Lavender. And I only use Young Living oils. They are the best, the purest. Totally trust the company, and I know it's going to do what it's supposed to do. I'm almost out of it, so I'm taking the reducer out there. So we're going to do 10 drops of this too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so this helps with allergic reactions to stuff. If you are a little bit, if you get rashes from the deodorants or whatever, this can help soothe that and prevent that. And it's just a good oil to put in everything. Another one is sacred frankincense, which I feel like frankincense is good in everything too. It's another antiseptic one, so it's going to help with bacteria growth, just like the purification, which we know bacteria is what causes odor. It's not sweat that stinks. It's that moist environment, under your arm where it's not getting air and it's growing bacteria, and the bacteria is actually what causes the odor. Hold on. Ava wants back in. So this is another one, and this one I'm just going to do 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Plus there's a lot of studies out there that frankincense, especially sacred frankincense, can help prevent cancer, and there's even some studies where people use it as a treatment. I figure all the years I've been putting aluminum under my armpits and all the things that we come in contact with, it can't hurt to have a little bit of prevention there. There's definitely the studies linked from breast cancer to regular over-the-counter deodorants. So, also copaiba. This one's highly anti-inflammatory in property, and so that's also a good one, so that your skin doesn't get inflamed. And another one for bacteria is tea tree. So we'll do 3, 4, 5, and 6 tea tree. All right, so now we got our oils in there. I'm just going to mix it up. Make sure at this point that your potion isn't hardening yet. We definitely don't want that. So now we're actually going to just mix in the baking soda and the arrowroot powder. Now arrowroot powder you can get at Whole Foods or Fresh Market. A lot of times if they have a lot of red mill products, you can find it real easy in the regular grocery store. But I've measured out 1 cup plus 4 tablespoons. So this can get a bit tricky because this is not a big enough container. So we're actually going to transfer it over to this bowl here, bigger glass bowl. I should have done this in the beginning. I think that's why I got the bowl out, but I put it in this one. So you can actually start out in a bigger bowl if you have a big enough pan to use it in a double boiler, which I don't. So I think that should be cool enough to touch. So we're going to put the whole mixture in here. And I just set it over the hot pan just to kind of warm up the bottom again a little bit so that it doesn't cool on the edges, because I don't want any of this beeswax to harden before I can put the powder into it. So hopefully that's not happening. No, I think that's good. So. All right. I'm going to use a fork and move back over to this burner. And add your arrowroot powder. And also, I have a 1/2 cup plus 4 tablespoons of baking soda. I buy them in the big containers like this at Target because you can use baking soda for everything. So, put some of that in there. Now you're going to just take your fork and mix everything up here. Make sure I didn't forget anything. Nope. So as I'm mixing that up, I'll go through the recipe for you here. It is 1.5 heaping tablespoons of melted beeswax, 5 tablespoons of raw artisanal coconut oil, or like I said, you could use the hard coconut butter or cocoa butter. 4 tablespoons of unrefined coconut oil. 1.5 tablespoons of whatever oil you choose. We used vitamin E oil and almond oil. 1 tablespoon apple cider vinegar. 10 drops purification oil, essential oil. 10 drops lavender essential oil, 3 drops copaiba essential oil, 6 drops frankincense essential oil, and 6 drops tea tree essential oil, 1.5 cups plus 4 tablespoons of baking soda, 1 cup plus 4 tablespoons of arrowroot powder. Add just a few. This looks a little bit dry. We want it to be the consistency of mashed potatoes. So I'm just going to add a little bit more almond oil and just a dash more of the vinegar. Okay. When it's done, it should be about the consistency of mashed potatoes, and you'll want to use a spoon to pack it into your little containers here, and then let it just sit and cool off, and this is what you get for the final result. Again, like I said, make sure that you use it as with your finger, apply it with your finger like this and rub in instead of putting it on like a regular deodorant thing. All right, well, I hope this helps. Thank you very much. Okay, so my finished product was just a little bit too dry. It was more like a kind of a dough than mashed potatoes. So I ended up adding 1 tablespoon of coconut oil, a splash of apple cider vinegar, and probably about 1 tablespoon of the almond oil. So that actually got it, once I started working it with my hands like this, kind of like bread dough, you could actually get it to the point where it breaks away from the side of the bowl. So it's kind of like dough, but kind of mashed potato-like too, and that it feels a little bit foamy. So that's the actual consistency that you want. And you can use a spoon, or you can just use your fingers and pile it into your tubes. You could also use a little, if you just like to use a little jar, like a baby food jar or something like that. Tap it to get all the air bubbles out. There's one. There's 2. The consistency on this is a little bit different each time. I just try to always, in the beginning, I tried to figure out what was my favorite consistency, what tend to work the best, go on the best. And now I aim towards that. So I'm really not a great measurer. I kind of just add a little here and there. So the measurements aren't necessarily exact, but you can always go back in the end and add a little bit more arrowroot powder. Okay, so if your final formula came out a little bit too dry, then you just add a little bit more oil. If your formula came out a little bit too wet, then you can add a little bit more arrowroot powder and just get it to that good consistency like I showed. So I promised that I would show you the actual written recipe, so I'm going to switch over to that right now. And like I told you before, I'm not a great measurer. I kind of add a little of this and a little of that, but this gives you a little bit of idea of what to start with, and then you can just perfect it in the end. If you would like a copy of this recipe, just email me at rosebillock@yahoo.com, ROSEBILLOCK@yahoo.com. And also, if you don't have somebody that can get you Young Living essential oils, you can also email me. I'm actually a distributor, so I can help you with that. All right, you can just pause this and write down the video.